Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's webinar from Anika Digital. My name is Darren. I'm going to be your host today. This week, we're joined by Zach from the Anika Digital team. Zach, do you want to briefly introduce yourself, give a quick overview on what you're covering today?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Zach Avir. I basically run some of the content on accounts at Anika Digital, and I'm going to be looking at Google AI overviews and sort of their effect on search, and how it sort of changes the way we have to do things for SEO and content in particular.
Brilliant. Okay, right. Before we start, let's do a couple of polls. So I'm going to click start on the first one. It should pop up on your screen now. The first one is, how often do you use AI overviews? Is it every day, occasionally? I always scroll past them.
I'm intrigued to see some of these results, just to see if it sort of matches with a lot of the, the articles I've been reading and some of the data that's come from it.
Yeah, I've definitely been using them a lot more recently. I think they must have improved. They're always improving. It really depends on the type of search, I suppose, which I think is one of the next questions. So we've got 25% for every day, 54% for occasionally, and 20%, which is quite high actually, for I always scroll past them.
Well, that's a bell curve for you, isn't it? Sort of, it sort of fits it pretty perfectly.
Question number 2. What do you use AI overviews for? Is it A, basic information, B, shopping advice, or C, none of the above?
Yeah, it's quite broad, that, but like basic information is things like recipes, or like, what about this place? I know that some people use it also for like advice on, what should I look for in XYZ. So I think it's just various ways of using it, really. I'm just intrigued to know the intent, really, if it's informational, if it's commercial. Where do you see the value in it, really?
Yeah. And it looks like we've got 80% for basic information, no one for shopping advice, which is interesting, and 20% for none of the above.
That's interesting, because I think I remember reading some things about the potential for Google to start introducing, sort of a lot more paid ads and stuff like that, and a bit more paid information in your, your AI sort of stuff. So it's interesting that not many people use it for that just yet.
And then question 3, do you find yourself relying on social platforms for information? A, yes, more than Google. B, sometimes, or C, no, I rely on Google.
And yeah, when I use Google here, I realize, we've also got other search engines, but it's just a case of it's the simplest one to use. But yeah, it's just whether we're using internet or if everyone's using different mediums, really.
Would you classify Reddit as a social platform? I guess
I would personally. That's what I have, because I think it's it's where people are communicating on message boards predominantly. So I'd say it's social media, at least for the intents of this talk.
I think for certain informational searches that I do, getting real experiences from people, often unfiltered when it comes to things like Reddit, is really, really useful, compared to these kind of comparison engines that you get sometimes, or affiliate link sites that maybe have an agenda behind the information they're providing. We've got 3% for yes, more so than Google, 55% sometimes, and 41% no, I rely on Google.
Okay, interesting.
Brilliant. Okay. Handouts are available here somewhere. If you have a look on the top right, I believe, under handouts, you should find the slides from today. I will hand things over to Zach. I will stay in chat. So if you've got any questions, please do feel free to post them. Some of them I answer as we're going through. Other ones we'll probably wait until the end and then do a Q&A. So I'll let you know which is which. And yeah, that's it from me. Over to you, Zach.
All right, no problem. Thanks, Darren. Let me share my presentation. All right, can everyone see that?
Yeah, we've got that.
Okay, perfect.
There's a top right, there's some arrows. If you want to expand the screen, you can do that there.
Top right.
Not you, sorry, everyone in chat.
You're right. I was like, I thought it's already the size of the monitor. I don't think I can make it any wider. Right, yeah. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. Sort of today's webinar, I'm going to be looking at Google AI overviews, their effect on SERPs, and what this means for SEO content, SEO and content in particular. So as I said, sort of a little bit about me. I'm Zach Aver. I'm a senior content account manager at Annika Digital. I've worked in content marketing and sort of dabbled a bit in SEO for around 10 years, with about over 8 of those in agency. I've also worked on a wide range of clients, and I'm sort of, when it comes to marketing, I'm kind of fascinated by communication and the way humans, talk to one another and things like that. I'm also a former sort of anti-AI guy who's coming around to the benefits it can provide. I think Darren's sort of firmly in the opposite camp, but it's taken me a while. I was a bit of a Luddite at first, but I'm starting to learn, where the application of it is really useful. So that's a little bit about me, and that's where sort of the focus of today is going to be, is all around the content side of things, with a bit of SEO. So for anyone not familiar with Annika, Annika is an award-winning digital agency. We're based in Leicester. And the thing that kind of sets us apart is that we focus on data a lot. It's sort of a data-driven approach that defines what we do. We're also a multi-channel service provider, and we combine, paid, organic, design, PR, everything sort of to meet clients' needs and provide support across the entire digital marketing spectrum. However, for today's purposes, we're going to stick to a purely SEO and content focus. I think last week's webinar was already sort of around the idea of AI overviews. I think James may have been on that one too. And I think that one was really good, showing you ways of monitoring results, achieving results with AI overviews and things like that. And I think even going back to the end of January, I think Anne did a great presentation on some of the latest data regarding the way people search with AI overviews. So with all of that in mind, we're going to look at, very basically what they are, the impact overviews have had on SERPs and SEO, and what it means for the future of SEO and content, and then a few strategies on how to go sort of with and against the grain. So firstly, let's set the scene. What are AIOs? AI overviews are the summaries generated by Google's AI, Gemini, to sort of provide faster results to user queries. We've seen them before now. We all know what they are. They usually take the form, of like summaries, guides, key facts or figures. I think recipes are another big one that has become really popular when it comes to AIOs. So a lot of sort of informational stuff that has been the primary sort of source of your AI overviews. And then also, depending on the intent of your search, you will find AIO will be followed by various sort of snippets. You'll have your people also ask, your FAQ drop downs. You'll have organic sort of video listings. You'll have product listings potentially, and then you'll probably find your search results. The ones that we are most familiar with the most, and this means sort of the chance of becoming top of the page, becoming slimmer, really, because that real estate at the top has become more valuable as it pushes everything further down. And this has had the obvious effect of pushing organic results further down page, which makes the top 10 more of like a top 5. I think it's a small shift in terms of the actual layout. If you were to measure it, it's millimeters or centimeters, but it's had a massive impact on the way that we search. I think for the most part, you'll find that across the board, websites have seen impressions often maintain or improve. I think I've seen it certainly, but generally CTRs have dipped, with the introduction of AIOs. So as Google's added more to the top of the page, more snippets, more FAQs, more videos, and now AI overviews, traffic shares being diluted. So this sort of chart here from Sierra Interactive, I think really sort of illustrates that perfectly, where you can see organic click-through rate when AIO isn't shown, and you can see there's a noticeable increase from January 2024 to January 2025. So you can see the traffic has increased both in terms of impressions and clicks, really. And then when you've got the organic CTRs dropped when AIO is shown, and you can see the very obvious decline as a result of having some of that traffic taken away by Google's overviews. This also shows there's a greater demand to appeal to snippets, multimedia, that sort of thing. So people are changing the way that they search. And I think this makes sense. We can see why Google is trying new things. The internet isn't new anymore. It often feels like it is, like sort of the cutting edge, but it's been around a very long time. And there are billions of pages, many of them low quality, and they create a sea of, poor quality content at the bottom. So I was doing some research, and from Ahrefs, it was this really interesting bit where they were doing their own study on it, and they sort of found, 14 billion pages may seem like a huge number, but it's not the most accurate representation of the entire web. Even compared to the size of the Site Explorer's index of 340.8 billion pages, our sample size for this study is quite small and somewhat biased towards the quality side of the web. So it's very small text, so I apologize, but even within their own study, they limited it to just the quality side of the internet, and they still came up with 14 billion pages to look at. So how does Google ensure that good content rises to the top when they've got this many pages to look at? I think a great example was this other one I found from Marketing Profs, where they said there are more than 6 million articles online about how to winterize your home, many on websites that have nothing to do with home ownership. So it's just funny how you've got this great proliferation of content, and Google has to try and find a way of finding the relevant stuff, the useful stuff, and making sure it rises to the top. And I think as such, users too are tired of trawling through old pages, and Google is looking for novel ways to keep relevant, up-to-date content where it should be. So for me, it's not really a surprise that they're bringing in all these new facets. Add to this that Google's also noticed more people turning to social platforms like YouTube, TikTok, and Reddit, something we sort of touched on at the start there with some of the polls. But, you can sort of see the way that YouTube's and TikTok are beating some of the more common, like DuckDuckGo, for example, and sort of catching up with Bing and other search engines for the platforms that consumers find most helpful when searching for information, which I think is really interesting. So these guys are starting to outperform, and I think Google's taking notice of it, and they're realizing they have to change the way they do things too to stay relevant and keep that, obviously, astronomical market share. So this battleground sort of has led to Google trying to keep more clicks to themselves. They are a business after all, so it makes sense. AIOs are just the newest iteration of their attempt to stay on top. You can sort of see Google's been trying to ensure quality is front and center since 2011. You had the Panda update, and then going all the way to 2022 with the helpful content update. The focus has always been on quality over quantity. It's never had an issue with quantity of pages. There's always been a glut of stuff to work from. It's about finding the right stuff for their users. And snippets, videos, AIOs are all attempts to ensure users find the info they need quickly in whatever format they think is most relevant. But in this, I think this is quite interesting too, sorry. This was, again, from that previous Ahrefs study. You can sort of see the number of visits you're getting on of those 14 billion pages. 13.6 billion, the majority are not getting any visits, but you're getting sort of 270, you're getting about 4% or just under 4% are getting millions and millions of views. So it's really interesting to show how competitive the landscape is for those search results, even just on, what Ahrefs could find on the quality side of the internet. This is, I also like to think that generative AI has kind of been a blessing and a curse in this regard too. The latest iteration sort of AI tools has allowed users to generate content en masse. This makes black hat tactics like content farms easier, cheaper to run, which can only add to existing low value content. For anyone who's attended my previous talks on content and AI, you'll know very much that I like to talk about the like zombie content farms that sort of buy URLs and then just fill them full of auto-generated content and make the most of their domain authority, until it sort of atrophies and dies. And it's really, really sort of dark side of the internet that is going on. I do think it's also interesting. You can sort of see one article I read suggested that for news articles alone, so this is just news sites, they found 60,000 AI-generated pieces published daily. And they sort of broke that down by, you can see the number 75% were human, but then even within that 60,000 had, like 18% minor, 2% major, 5% fully AI. And then your topics, you can sort of see where the AI generated topics are. Tech, beauty, business, gaming, etc. Opinion, incredibly low, because AI can't have an opinion, really. It's good at summarizing and that sort of thing, but it can't form its own opinion as such. So there's something to be said about the responsible use of AI here too, and sort of the questions of how best to implement and police it. And this complex state of affairs is all playing out online in real time. And SEO is just kind of, in the middle of it. And I think the good news is that with SEO and content, the silver lining is it all still comes back to the users. With everything we do, it always comes back to what do readers want to see, what do users want to find. They want relevant information. They want to read, watch, or listen to other human voices. Something you were talking about, Darren, at the start there was the way that you find Reddit often more reliable, even though it may be unfiltered. You're getting the point of view from someone who is, particularly, being honest with their input, and it's a real person. It's not something that's just been generated. And I think this sort of a recent study by Pangram Lab sort of shows this. They looked at news pieces again, and they discovered that their readers spent overwhelmingly more time on pages with human written content, 93% there. For their purposes, they use the test of 100% AI versus 100% human, which obviously you need to take with a pinch of salt, but it still shows how naturally readers can pick up on authenticity and quality of your content. And I think it also shows that EAT is not just the handy acronym, but also evidence of what readers want. They want expertise, they want experience, they want authoritativeness, they want trustworthiness. And, so if you're able to show off these attributes, you're likely to score higher. Just to quickly check chat, I'm not at the moment. I don't think there's any questions as such yet.
No, we're all good. There are some really interesting questions on the Q&A, but we'll open that up to both of us at the end.
Okay. And I think this is where we can sort of see SEO shift, and it kind of stays the same a little bit in my mind. It's a bit of both, because I think your SEO strategies will still need to consider brand versus non-brand. That's already something that we already do. Regardless of AI overviews, if you have decent domain authority and control over your brand, you'll find, winning pages as well as snippets easier with branded terms. For non-brand, it can be a bit trickier. You'll need to consider, your lower click-through rates, how that's going to affect what you're finding. You're going to have to focus on the types of phrases. Sort of high intent, longer format key phrases are also being targeted by AIOs. So you'll need to look at formats that can make you stand out. Review pages, versus pages, features, product content, online tools. I think it's interesting here. These two charts. One of these got from Anne's presentation, which I thought was an AI overview search presence comparison, was really interesting. And you can sort of see the increase in how often AI overviews are shown. And then another chart here was from another article, which I was reading about how in the same sort of time period from May to December, you can see sessions drop as you've seen AI sort of pop up more in search. So it's just showing, the correlation between the two. And then another thing, besides your brand versus non-brand, and the looking at the length of key phrases, is also the quality. There's already a lot of low-value content out there, which I think I've shown already. So you need to spend more time planning pieces that can be enriched with multimedia, and then it could be used to be broken down for social use. Think of, sort of a less is more approach. So for this one, this will either allow you to rank higher because of the uniqueness of your piece, or give you a higher chance of landing an AIO snippet. So whether this is you're at the top of the organic listings or you're featured in an AI overview, it can only be a good thing. For example, here, sort of this point here, when clients show up in AI, organic CTR rises from 0.74 to 1.02, and similarly for paid CTR. So you can sort of see how you need to make sure that you're both sticking to the classic SEO principles. You still need to focus on the quality and the brand versus non-brand approach and how you appeal to those. And this will obviously have a knock-on effect for content. So to my mind, content will need to take this lead from SEO and focus on unique content with a specific point of view. This will hopefully help you write for your readers and do something LLMs can't really do at the moment, which is add a unique perspective. I found this one is really good. It's sort of assembled by SparkToro, but they sort of looked at searches Americans completed in 2024. So apologies if it's a bit small, but I'll try and make it out for you. So 58% resulted in 0-click searches. The majority of those, the browsing session ends. And in the sort of the remaining 21%, they go to the Google All tabs. They find it wherever that somewhere else. The 41% of that go through to a click go to 70% to unpaid organic listings. So it's still the primary way that people are interacting with the internet. 28.5% go to maps, images, news, other Google properties. This is where we can sort of see AI overviews fill in. And then 1% goes to paid ads. And also keep in mind, use of ad blockers may impact. But it just shows you the main thing there being that for every 1,000 searches, only 360 clicks are actually going to the open web. So that's even more sort of loss in terms of where you're getting your actual click-through from. And it shows why you need to write for your readers, make sure you appeal to them, make sure that the piece is hyper-focused, that what you're writing is unique, that it stands out. And it all comes back to, that current LLMs can summarize well, but not research or add a unique perspective in my mind. And then this one also I think is really interesting because it kind of shows another sort of take on how you want to structure your content. The way you want to keep it more unique, because of the way that AIOs are targeting your lower frequency or your lower value, your lower search volumes. So this is again from Ahrefs, and it shows the key phrases which trigger AIOs, and you can sort of see if the volume is 0 to 50, you're probably going to get a 30% chance of triggering an AI overview. And that number it sits around the top when it comes to sort of search volumes from about 0 to about 400, I'd say, with some spikes in between. But then your super high search volume phrases are too vague generally for LLMs and AIs. There's probably just not enough context clues for it to take in and understand what you're searching for. So it's probably not going to target one of those. And that makes it kind of tricky as a content writer, because for me, writing about these terms at the bottom here is already difficult because they're super general. You're not reaching the right audience necessarily, so it might be wasted exercise. But these ones, you're competing with AI overviews. So how do you figure that out? Again, it comes back to, writing for the reader. It comes back to EAT. It comes back to a unique approach. It comes back to making sure you either stand out against AI overviews with something different, or you present something so useful that it has to be incorporated by the AI overviews. And I think, that's sort of the only way that content and SEO can really thrive with so many new things pushing the organic listings down. I think content plans also need to consider the way people search. So this one's quite interesting to me because if you think going back, Google terms have always been really, really economical with the way that we speak. If you think about most searches will be done via typing either on phone or a keyboard. So you'd probably search, if I were to go for looking for a restaurant tonight, I'd probably say best best restaurants Nottingham. Just cut out everything, cut out prepositions, cut out absolutely everything, and keep it as simple as possible. And that's how search phrases are often shown when you look at key phrase choices and things like that. Both ChatGPT and voice search, people have started to search more the way they speak. They've added more context because AI has to work from clues that you give it and information you give it. People have had to become more descriptive in the way they speak and the way they search, more colloquial tones with contractions, extra qualifiers. It's all the ways that you and I speak to each other on a daily basis are becoming more and more common in search. And I think that's why you can sort of see this interestingly on this chart on the right, is the way that the bell curve of the length of search terms in AIOs. So these are, you can see the number of keywords triggering the keyword count in total for the search term, the number of keywords triggering the AIOs, and then you can sort of see the percentage, which I think is the main focus here, of keywords triggering AIOs and ads and SERPs. And you can see there's a glut here around 3, 4, and 5 words. So that sort of sits around the 15 and 14% mark, and it kind of drops off again on either side. So it's kind of, again, like it's sort of a weird bell curve, but was currently sitting at like a phrase of about 3 to 5 words, which is still quite short at the moment. But I think you're probably leaning towards, you can see these numbers creeping up in 6, 7 words, going up to full sentences for search terms, with people being hyper specific about the things that they're searching for. And this means, for content, that there's going to be more freedom for nuance. There's going to be more freedom to really focus in on a specific need that people are looking for when it comes to their search terms, to try and compete with AIOs. And I think it's going to allow for more freedom. Whereas before, you were probably competing for, maybe low search volume, but you're looking for this at the same sort of 10 key phrases as your competitor. You can really create niches for yourself with sort of hyper-focused pieces that have a unique perspective and are written, as I say, for the reader, for the person that you're trying to reach. So what strategies can you employ? I think first and foremost, work with what you've already got. You can focus time on repurposing or combining old content into something new and more bespoke. If you go sort of page 12 into of your blogs, there's probably loads of stuff there that can be reused, especially if it used to perform well. You need to identify these pieces, bring them together into one big central piece, make it something unique, make it something different. You reuse some of the copy that you've got. You can save yourself so much time doing that. You can also, I think I always go back to this, it's something that Brad's used a lot in some of the training sessions, but it's important to remember that websites like cars need regular maintenance to perform well. So you need to just keep on going back to it. You can't just keep adding new. You need to sometimes go back to the old and figure out what you can do with it. So that's one place to start, I think, is really helpful, and often not that time consuming, because you can identify 5 or 6 pieces, start with those, bring them up to date, maybe add some stats or figures, maybe get a quote, turn it into something that you can use on socials, anything along those lines, really. You can also experiment with new formats like videos. You've also got text-to-speech has come a long way. So you can sort of use AI voice tools and things like that to create, to take some quotes or to take information from existing articles and turn it into sort of thing that's easily shareable that you can use on other platforms. There are plenty of tools out there. You need to find something that works for you. You can create videos, to create graphics, to create audio files, just to create multimedia in general that you wouldn't be able to do in your own time or without the skill set required. It's going to take obviously a lot of trial and error, but once you find the thing that you need, I think you'll be able to speed up the process a lot. And the other good thing I'd say currently about experimenting with different media is that you're not going to be affected by AIOs. It's all text-based at the moment. So it's a good way to ensure that you land in and amongst all of your multimedia side of things, as opposed to competing with the organic listings and AIOs. You can really break it out that way. And you also want to think about your channel mix. Most traffic comes from Google. However, because of the way that Google likes to experiment, you don't want to rely on it all the time. I can speak from experience that often when Google does a rollout of some changes to the core algorithm, we know that it means that for the next week or two, you're going to have to let it settle to really see what it's done. And at this point, I'm not sure Google knows necessarily what they're changing a lot of the time, just with some of the things that they put out and then roll back. I think maybe the algorithms become so complex that they don't necessarily understand every single side of it. But you also need to do things like consider other search engines and mediums. You need to consider other strategies. If you're only working with organic, you're going to have to look at potentially including maybe some time on paid PR or social. You need to look at really creating a wide mix to ensure that you don't have an all eggs in one basket scenario. This will sort of, something we always suggest is a fully aligned marketing strategy, just coherence across the board with different mediums to make sure that if one drops, you've got something to pick up the slack, really. And also, this is something I've suggested in my previous webinars, but don't be afraid to use AI as a tool if you're working in content and SEO. We've done some, in our training courses, we sort of touch on this a little bit. And I've done some sort of smaller experiments with just, some really beginner stuff just to try and show people the capabilities. But for me, when I think of AI as a tool, I think it's best at logical tasks that are reliant on parsing data and presenting it in helpful ways. It is, after all, it's good at information collation. It's good at presenting it back to you in a way that's easy to digest. And this can be really helpful for things like data requests, turning your figures into charts, that sort of thing. The list goes on. This one on the right was just an interesting one when I asked ChatGPT what's going on under the hood, just to try and find out. And because it's based on, sort of a logic, it's sort of a logic engine where it's trying to weight the value of words, trying to say what's the most likely phrase to come after the next thing. It's always going to be based in logic. And that's why, you want to try and keep the uniqueness, the human voice. You want to keep that in your work and make sure that you're presenting that, because that's something that Google values really, really highly. Here's one example I also used before for creative tasks. So if you're looking at creating a blog, for example, work with data, one of the things that's important to keep in mind when you're using AI tools is don't assume it knows what information is best. Don't be vague. You need to provide lots of detail, direction, examples. And obviously I think we're currently doing practice in-house of creating a library of really helpful prompts, which is really, really helpful because a lot of that information can often get siloed. But once you find something at work, save it, keep it for future reference, especially with content. If it's something that informs your LLM about your brand voice or direction, that's really helpful at ensuring that it sticks to the tone of voice that you want to keep. So, for example, this one on the right, very interesting topic, but it was one we just used was create a blog structure on how to sow grass seed. The blog should be designed to answer common FAQs, so we're given it a direction. The information should be presented in easily digestible form with subheadings and bullets where relevant. The audience is homeowners in the UK as well as hobby gardeners. So we've given it the style that we want, easily digestible. We've given it the format, subheadings and bullets. We've given an audience so it knows who it's speaking to, homeowners in the UK with the geographic location. And then we've added some extra context, right, with a temperature of 0.6. Temperature is the creative freedom you give ChatGPT and tools like that. And it works from 0 to 1. So 0.1 being, as sort of technical as it can be, and 0.9 being very, very florid in their descriptions and things like that. So what you want to do is find the temperature that works for you. I find 0.6, 0.7 quite good for most purposes. You can also ask it to create 3 variations with varying temperatures and then combine them all to make it seem, a bit more human in my mind. So temperature is a fun thing to play around with when you get the chance. And then I've included the key phrase, the focus key phrase for the group where relevant, and include a meta title, a sample meta title and description that I can work from. This is kind of pointless endeavor at the moment. Making sure the type there's no longer 59 characters. The description is a max of 155. As it stands, ChatGPT and tools of that nature aren't very good at limiting counts of character counts or word counts. So you could say, give me, however many words. It won't often stick to that. So just take that with a pinch of salt. And then also I added a URL, here's something created by a competitor, for an example. And then below that, you can add, here is our brand, here's our about us, to find out more about the client that I'm writing for. And from there, it creates a really helpful blog structure. But you can see how it takes time and it takes effort. You can't be vague. You need to provide lots of direction and detail. It's not the same as just searching in Google. It's a lot more in depth. But once you get it right, it can be really, really helpful. Another thing is consider multimedia. Like I was saying, with video and things like that, it can be really helpful. It can also be useful just to create snippets that you can take out and share on LinkedIn, for example. Like Roofmaker here. This was a really interesting one where I was able to find the Met Office had free data regarding sunlight hours in the UK, starting from, I think, like the 1890s up to present day. And what we were able to do was we were able to get that data out, use ChatGPT to clean the data because it was an absolute mess. It was just facts and figures, just on like a notepad, frankly. And then turn it into something that was actually actionable and create a graph using ChatGPT, which I was then able to give to the designer, who was able to tidy it up, make it look nicer, brand it for us. And then that's instantly something that can be really, really useful. And you can see how we've got this very obvious increase from the 1920s to 2020s, where you've seen a gradual increase in the average sunlight hours over time. And it shows like a really nice trend, or an interesting trend at least. So it just shows you how powerful something like this can really be. And yeah, that's it. So sort of in conclusion, what you want to do is don't panic. First of all, I like to think of it like every sort of major change in tech, from telephones to televisions to the internet, everything changes and everything kind of stays the same. And that's the same with AI overviews. It's changing aspects of the way that we search, but it's not changing the nature of search itself. People still need to find the information they need. It's just a matter of how we reach them. And to do that, you want to focus on user-focused content that appeals to your EAT principles. You want to focus on creating fewer, more in-depth pieces of content, at the direction from SEO, really targeting the key phrases that you really think you can sort of win. And then to help with that, you want to use AI to speed up the process, but don't rely on it as a solution, just as a tool. So it may mean that you're working on, content that is much longer in terms of word count, much richer in terms of the data you're providing, the videos, the infographics, that sort of thing. It may take more effort in that regard, but you can counteract that a bit with the use of AI tools, which can really, really speed it up, especially if you're sort of just a one-man band and things like that. But that's kind of where we are at the moment. Like I say, it's very much focused on the SEO and content aspect when it comes to the immediate effects of AIOs. But I think it's interesting to see how it's changing the way people search, where people search, and how we communicate with one another. And I think in time we'll see a bit more. But I think it's probably a positive in terms of freeing up SEO and content to be a bit more creative with the way that we approach things and the way we reach our audience. But yeah, it's a bit shorter than normal, but thanks. That's kind of where we're at. I hope you found that useful. We've got loads of time for questions now, which is really good.
Well, that's lucky because we've got some good ones.
That's good. Shall we go into them?
Yeah, we'll start with one from James. This one's in the chat. He says, Zach's studies show that human readers will read human content for longer.
Mm-hmm.
The studies also show that AI struggles to form opinions. Does that mean that in the future, as a human writer, injecting a bit more opinion might actually be beneficial?
Yes, to my mind, definitely. Like, again, Darren, I'll use you as an example, but the fact that you go to Reddit for information, you trust the information on Reddit, even though technically I imagine they're unverified, they're just people chatting on a message board. But because it's coming from a person and it's unfiltered, it's an opinion that you can then have your own opinion on. It's not the like it's not just grey goo. It's something that means something. It's something different. It's something I touched on in the tone of voice stuff that I did at the beginning of the year, end of last year, I believe. Was if you're creating an echo chamber where all the information that's being fed into something is just being reverberated over and over again in the same different iterations, but the same information, you're going to create an echo chamber where there's just noise and there's nothing coming through clear. But having your own opinion makes something unique and different. And I think that's really important. Yeah.
I was saying earlier, it's becoming increasingly difficult to filter out user-generated content from other content as these models improve and the language improves. But I think that opinion point is a really good point from James. The next question relates to your money or your life content. Just for everyone to be aware, your money or your life content is terms used by Google to describe any content which could affect things like mental well-being, physical health, anything to do with financial stability, safety, anything related to the future sometimes. So in those cases, that content where it has those real life consequences, Google usually has a higher standard when evaluating that EAT algorithm. The question relates to the AIO. Are things more protected, more filtered when it comes to the AIO for those types of content, for that type of content?
I don't actually know off the top of my head. I would assume there would be more so. I know from, sort of conversations with the pay team, for example, when it comes to ad copy for your money or your life type stuff, it's very, very strict. So I can only imagine that the same filters they have in place for paid activity will probably be the same for AI. I think it's always worth taking with a pinch of salt, checking the sources. I originally, when I started studying uni, I started with journalism. So I always tried to try and find primary sources. Sort of been drilled into me from the start. Is I want to know exactly who wrote it, when they wrote it, why they wrote it, and I think that's usually helpful because I think there was an interesting news case where there was a lawyer in the States who'd used ChatGPT to form their defense on a case, and ChatGPT just referenced some kind of statute, some kind of case in law where it set a precedent. But that case didn't exist, and they had to kind of retract it in court to be like, oh no, wait, this case never happened, and the AI just hallucinated it just to get its opinion, really. So I think with your money or life stuff, it's always good to be safe, rather safe than sorry.
Yeah, agreed. I think it does. There are probably tied to restrictions. The other part of this question was whether it's treated differently in the UK and Europe to the USA. I think the answer there is regulation is often quite a bit stricter due to various different things, Digital Services Act, GDPR. So those answers are probably restricted as well, rather than just letting it go. It's a bit looser in the US, I believe. The next question was an interesting one, and I had to do some research around this. The blue box on the right of the AIO, there are some recommended links to the answers. Do you see that US links are ranking higher than local country links and answers? Is it pushing local links further down the page? Now, I don't know if you've got an answer on this. I had to do some research, and the answer is quite interesting.
No, go ahead. I don't have anything for that one at the moment.
So as far as I can research at the moment, yes, it is prioritizing US links at this time because of the amount of content and the authority bias for content in the US. It's likely to prioritize those links from the US in that blue box, and as a result, it does push local search results and local links down. There is some issues that Google has encountered with the DMA, the Digital Markets Act, where it's trying to be more fair to a wider range of content and sources. And so they are rolling out changes to that to try and prioritize more local search where it's relevant. But as we all know with Google, these things can sometimes take a lot of time, and especially with AI, where they're still in development phase. The AIOs have not formally been rolled out as a finished product yet. As I understand it, that's still going to take some time.
Mm-hmm. Just very quickly, Darren, going back to the previous question around the UK versus the US, it just stuck in my mind because I remember reading something earlier this week about it. We're looking at agentic process automation. But the ICO is an organization for protecting data, and they have a really good blog, which I can share after the call or after this about debunking data protection myths, and just kind of the state of play in the UK. If someone would like that, I can put it in the chat.
We've got a question around longer search terms. So the question was, is that being driven through ChatGPT type platforms? I guess as people become more familiar with language models and conversational type search, the search terms in general start to increase in length.
Yeah, that's where I see it going. It's just because it'll be easier to ask the question that you want. It just comes down to people are lazy. We are when we come to searching things. We don't want to type out a full sentence necessarily. And if ChatGPT if I can type just a whole paragraph or I can speak a whole paragraph and it can come back with an answer, that's going to speed it up incredibly, especially if it's able to understand, like I say, your colloquialisms or your contractions and things like that, things it would have missed potentially in the past when it was a much more basic system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm certainly could be accused of being one of the lazier. If I can find a quick way to an answer, I will use it. But then I somehow always find time to say my please and thank yous to AI when I use it. So
you've got to, Darren, just in case the AI overlords decide it's time. You want to be one of the polite ones.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. Last one on the blue box on the AIO. The ranking for those, they're different from the ranking on the actual organic search results. Is that right?
I believe so. I think Anne may have covered. I need to double check those slides from the previous meeting.
I think
Or
the
from the
testing
previous
we've done, they look like separate. I think there's an entirely separate algorithm model that ranks those links versus the organic search results.
One of the interesting things I remember from Brighton SEO was there was one of the talks I went to was talking about the AIOs and how his experiments had found, searching from Germany in particular, he was looking at you'd search for something and then he'd get the suggestions on the right, and he'd be looking for product suggestions in particular for watches or bicycles or whatever the term was. And he found that it seemed like it was behaving like a paid listing, because it wasn't necessarily, it was like, I want the 10 best mountain bikes or something like that. And then he'd read review websites, and the review websites would be different from the ones listed on the right-hand side. So it might be that they're testing that as like a space potentially for more sort of paid focused activity moving forward. But those were just his experiments, so I can't speak to it as a whole. That was just from his sort of messing about with it, and he thought it was quite interesting how the review and the stuff that appeared didn't really match necessarily what was being shown to him in the AI. So yeah, I think it's open for debate at the moment, but I don't know how much we know.
Brilliant. Michael's asking for a list of top 10 tips to help optimize for AIO results. I think we're all still doing a lot of testing. A couple of things you've raised today. Is there a couple of top tips you could give for that? Is it just answering questions clearly, making sure everything's structured correctly, that type of stuff?
Yeah, first and foremost, your layout. Something that Brad and I work on a lot when it comes to pages is answering specific questions. So FAQs, if you can fit FAQs on a page somewhere, they're really, really helpful because it's something that Google can pull from instantly. And FAQs are really quick and easy to build out yourself. Often just Googling a term will give you like those people also asked, or you'll see it in the AIO itself. You'll see some of the FAQs that appear. If you're able to answer those questions better and just stick them, above the footer in like an accordion on a page or something like that, it doesn't necessarily take away from the experience of the page, but it definitely adds to the value and potentially can get you higher up the page. So that's an easy win, I think. I think that's a great blog that I'm going to have to write for sure. So thanks for the title. But I'll have to think on a few more. But yeah, it's all about writing for your reading being a lot more unique. But I'll try and give you a few more ideas. Keep your eyes on the Annika blog for that one.
Bro, that's great. I think we've grilled you enough.
Right.
I'm going to send a link which should appear on your screen now. If you could spare a few minutes to leave us a review, it goes a long way. I know the team put a lot of effort into these presentations, and that really helps us out in spreading the word about these webinars. You'll receive a recording of today's webinar in the next few hours, so have a look out for that if you want to catch up on everything Zach's talked about today. Next week, we do have Brad, who is in the chat. Title yet to be decided, but it's probably going to be a follow-on from this one, and then maybe going into a bit more depth about the technical side of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it from us today. Thank you all for joining. I hope you have a lovely weekend. I'm hosting again next week, so if you join us next week, you'll hear from me again. Otherwise, thank you very much for attending. Thank you, Zach.
Thanks, guys.